Members will please remain standing while the Chief Executive enters the chamber. The Chief Executive. Before we start the session, as you are of course aware, there was a Richter scale 7 earthquake in Haiti. The disaster was severe and tens of thousands may have been killed. Countries, including China, have decided to take part in the salvage and the rescue operation. And we would like to express our condolences to families of those killed in Haiti. May I suggest that we observe a 1-minute silent tribute for victims killed in the Haitian earthquake. The Chief Executive will now address the Council. Mr. President, honourable members, I am delighted to come to the Council to exchange views with you at the start of the new year. I would like to take this opportunity to highlight the main areas of work for the SAR government this year. First, on the consultation exercise on constitutional reform. The debate on constitutional development in Hong Kong started in 1984. It's been 25 years since. In the process, views were sometimes divided, leading to polarization in the community. There are, however, no quick fixes to the conflicts arising from constitutional development. The duty of the government is to narrow down the differences progressively and forge common grounds. We could then overcome the difficulties step by step in achieving the goal of universal suffrage. At present, there is common consensus among the public. The public do not wish to see another stalemate in our constitutional development. In the consultation document, the government proposes to take an important step towards the goal of universal suffrage on the basis of the 2007 resolution of the NPC Standing Committee. It carries positive significance for the realization of universal suffrage in 2017 and 2020. I hope that all sectors will, in a rational manner, put forward their views during the consultation period. A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Whether we move forward, stand still, or be locked in infighting is but a flip of mind for members. Recently, some political parties made an announcement on the referendum in 5 geographical constituencies campaign. I note that since its announcement, the plan has not been endorsed in mainstream views. As a matter of fact, the basic law does not provide for a system of referendum in the Hong Kong SAR. The so-called referendum, in whatever form, has no legal basis and effect in Hong Kong. It is not recognized by the SAR government. However divergent our views or positions may be on the question of Hong Kong's constitutional development, we could engage in discussion, but we must at the same time act strictly in accordance with the procedure laid down in the Basic Law. Any move that be passed from the procedure as prescribed in the Basic Law would not help the community in forging consensus. The second challenge in the year is economic recovery. I remain cautiously optimistic about the economic outlook of the year, but I will not let my guard down. The economy of Hong Kong has seen recovery in recent months. Retail sales are strong, export has picked up slightly again, and the employment market has seen improvement. However, our economic performance is susceptible to external factors. At the moment, the recovery of the global economy remains unsteady. In particular, the developed economies still face substantial downside risks. As such, the recovery in Hong Kong may still be capricious. Firstly, as consumers in Europe and the USA need to increase savings and reduce debts, we cannot, so their spending power is reduced and demand for export is lower. We therefore cannot expect the export of Hong Kong to rapidly resume the pace of growth to the pre-financial tsunami level. Secondly, the fundamentals of the American economic recovery remain rather weak. The upturn of the economy is driven primarily by fiscal stimulus in the public sector and monetary measures. There is still insufficient driving force from the private sector, with the unemployment rate reaching double digits. There will be midterm elections in the US Congress this year. Protectionist sentiments will inevitably grow. We could not dismiss the dark shadow cast over global economic recovery by the possibility of another US economic recession. Paul Krugman, a renowned economist and Nobel laureate, indicated recently that there is a 40% chance of another downward spiral in the US economy this year. Thirdly, the timing of exit from the stimulus strategy for various governments and central banks has added substantially to the uncertainties surrounding the economic prospects around the world and in Hong Kong. A hasty exit may plunge the world into another recession. An overdue exit may very likely fuel inflation and even another round of asset bubbles. European and American central banks are now paving the way for an exit, and we will keep a close watch of developments. After stimulus exit begins, there will be a drop in liquidity in the financial market and a rise in interest rates. This may add to the volatility of the US dollar exchange rate and pose a new challenge to steady economic recovery. Last month, during my duty visit in Beijing, Premier Wen Jiabao mentioned the deep-rooted conflicts in Hong Kong. By that, he was referring to the economic transformation in Hong Kong. We have started work on this front. We have proposed to develop 6 industries in which we have an advantage, with a view to promoting the diversity of our economic structure and avoiding over-reliance on the financial services industry. The concrete plans will be rolled out one by one within this year, and we ask members for your full support. Of course, Hong Kong also faces many other deep-rooted conflicts, such as political and social conflicts, apart from those in relation to economic restructuring. On social conflicts, these have mainly to do with the issue of poverty and the aspirations of the young people. Our economy may have stabilized, and the unemployment rate may be slowly coming down from the peak in the middle of last year. We all know for a fact that life remains tough for the low-income earners. There are also much grievances among the middle-income group and the young people. In the face of a slide in the economy, businesses have to cut costs. Many in the salaried class have suffered pay cuts or even layoffs. The economy has just begun to pick up, but so have rentals. Many employees have had no substantial increase in income in the past few years. Surveys show that those in poverty are growing in number. Since the 1st of January, many charges and fees have gone up, adding to the burden to the low-income group. Improving people's livelihood has always been my first and foremost task. I promise the government will actively consider measures to relieve the plight of low-income earners. At the same time, promoting economic development and creating more jobs are the highest of priorities in government administration. Whether Hong Kong could enjoy sustainable development hinges on our talents. Young people have drive, ideals, and potential. They are an important force in driving social development. Recently, there has been much concern in the community about the dissatisfaction of the post-80 generation, that is, those who were born in the 80s and who are now around 20 or 30 years old. We do need to learn more about our young people. We need to listen to them, understand what ideas and aspirations they have, and what they expect of society and the community and the government. We need to find out about their disappointment and dissatisfaction too. We who are older need to ask ourselves, time has changed. Have we become conservative and out of date? Is there enough communication between us and the young people? Do we know how we could communicate with the young people? The post-war generation in Hong Kong strived for efficiency and economic growth. Young people today strive for values and self-fulfillment. But it is more than just about pitching one generation against the other. When I ran for re-election, among the young people, they also hold different positions. When I ran for re-election in 2007, I proposed the idea of progressive development. That means we want both economic development and conservation in Hong Kong. The benefits of development should be more than just economic. We should also consider social and environmental benefits. The work direction of this government focuses on easing various conflicts and balancing different interests. We do not blindly pursue development at all costs, nor do we strive for conservation at the expense of development. We cherish young people's devotion to their home community in Hong Kong. If this devotion is applied to social building, it will help to promote sustainable progress for Hong Kong. Looking back at our work in the last 2 years, we have seen Hong Kong going through immense changes. We have seen many an achievement too. Amidst the global financial tsunami, the Hong Kong market remained first in the world in terms of total capital raised through IPOs. On the promotion of industrial diversification, Hong Kong, after 2 years of effort, has become the world's second largest wine auction center after New York. Since the beginning of last year, Hong Kong has become the world's third largest trading market of artwork after New York and London. I have every confidence that with our collective effort, Hong Kong will be a roaring tiger as we move into the year of the tiger. Thank you. Mr. Wong Yuk-man, I can't, your placard is blocking my view, my sight line, so can you please put it down? Now, the Chief Executive will now answer questions put by members. Members who wish to ask questions will please press the request to speak button to indicate their wish and wait for their turn. Members will please stand up when asking questions. After the Chief Executive has answered the question put by a member, the member may forthwith ask a short supplementary question on his or her question. Mr. Chen Hak-kan.
Mr. President, we can see that in society today there is this group of post-80s young people who are making use of different ways and means to express their views, and there have been echoes in society as a result. Some people say that it is because there is less chance for social mobility in society, and others are saying that they see a lot of unfairness in society, so they are voicing their dissatisfaction. Frankly speaking, and I believe for all of us in this chamber, I can say that not all of us cannot really understand 100% the mentality of this group of young people. From my own contact with the young people concerned, whether they are radical, moderate, or whether they have marched in the street, they have this common view, and that is that the administration is not really listening to their views, and they are not being respected, and their views are not really given a lot of stall by. My question for the Chief Executive is, how do you seek to interpret this phenomenon of this post-80s group, and do you think that the mechanism for communicating with young people by the government is adequate? As I said in my introductory speech, we must try to understand our young people better. We must come to grips with their views. In other words, the present communication is not enough. We are looking at a multi-channel way to contact young people, so as to try to grasp their aspirations for the future, for society, and for the government, so that in the formulation of policies, I hope that they can help build our society.
we must also formulate policies that are more attuned to young people so that their ideas, their passion can be better expounded so that they will be turned into a kind of social impetus. Communication is important, but we have to find a good way to do it. Traditional communication like district consultation or thematic consultation, discussions, these might not suit the young generation. They make use of different media. They might not like face-to-face communication. They find it difficult and embarrassing. They might like us to use the internet, Facebook, Twitter. All these channels must be explored so that there will be more channels for communication. To me, no matter what the communication is like and how many times there are, we must abide by a principle, and that is we must keep a cool mind, we must be rational, we must respect facts, and we must reason. In this aspect, the SARG is very much devoted to it. First of all, we would like to know the expectations and aspirations of these young people and why they are not happy with the present situation. And then we'll be very happy to increase communication methodologies, channels, and the number of times we communicate with them. But as I said, we must not put the post-80s group and other people on opposite sides. For the post-80s group, actually there is a whole spectrum of different stances. We must try to listen to them, we must try to understand them well so that we can really find the mainstream view that can represent the post-80s group. Mr. Gary Chan. Mr. President, I believe many young people would like to make use of a peaceful and rational way to communicate with the government. But before that, can't the administration not act like a parent and be patriarchal, but be accommodating in communicating with young people? I think if you take this another step, you will facilitate a dialogue between the two sides, and you will see more fruits from the communication. I agree totally with you. That is a prerequisite. When it comes to communication, people must be put on a par. We must not carry the age baggage. We must not carry our own views baggage before we can listen to others. Mr. Albert Ho, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chief Executive, at first, with regard to the national leaders' remark of deep-rooted conflicts, your first interpretation was about the economy, and we thought that it was a very shallow interpretation, but today I could see that you have a deep understanding into that. You said that it could refer to the economy, but there would be social conflicts, the wealth gap, and also more poverty among grassroots, and young people do not have a future, they lack hope, and also political conflicts. All kinds of conflicts are intertwined together. I think that is a more complete way of interpreting it. But of course, the crux of the matter is solution. How do you want to resolve these conflicts? All along, to resolve these matters, you must go to the root of the problem. And that is, why can't you implement social policies which you can see, which you find appropriate in order to tackle the problems at the root? This is because you do not have a free hand, because the way you are returned is such that you were returned by a small circle election. If you do not go to the root of the problem, and that is democratization of the political system so that you can free yourself from the control of the small circles, how can you resolve these deep-seated conflicts? So my question for you is very simple. You are saying that we should take a step-by-step approach to resolve the constitutional reform. Sorry, we cannot wait for many more years for democratization of the political system. So is it that you find yourself in a helpless position that you can just face these conflicts and just tell national leaders every time during your duty visit that you have done your best? First of all, national leaders, I believe, have a full understanding of matters in Hong Kong. I was basing my speech from Mr. Wen Jiabao's remarks. When I did my duty visit, there were different segments. I was talking to Mr. Wen Jiabao really about the economy, but about social and political matters. I was talking to Mr. Hu Jintao and Mr. Xi Jinping. It is not that Mr. Wen doesn't understand that there are deep-rooted conflicts in Hong Kong. In any organization, any body, any society, there are long-term, short-term, deep-rooted issues. As I said, Mr. Wen Jiabao, of course, understands that there are other conflicts and problems, but I was really talking about the economy to him. As for resolution of the constitutional reform package and especially universal suffrage issue, yes, we have to face up to it. But we have already got a very clearly defined timetable which is already entrenched in the law. In 2017, as the NPCSC has already decided solemnly that there can be universal suffrage as long as we can have local legislation for it. Also, in 2020, there will be universal suffrage to return the LEUNG. And in the circumstance, we think that we already know exactly where the aim is. What we have to do now is that for the 2012 elections, how we can further democratize the process, how can we make it more open so that we can walk closer towards universal suffrage. This is what we have to do. And in my term, I have always tried my best to do this. It is not that we are controlled by somebody. We have to understand that we need to forge a consensus of many people for constitutional development, but we haven't got that consensus in society. In 2005, we were taught a lesson. It is not that the central authorities did not allow us to do it, but there was no consensus in Hong Kong because we could not find a consensus which could have got the 2/3 majority support in LEUNG. That is why we had this stalemate. I really hope that we should not repeat that for 2012. Mr. Albert Ho, Mr. President, Mr. Chief Executive, I think what you said reflects another deep-rooted conflict, and that is a very sharp conflict between Hong Kong and the central authorities. You have said many times that in 2017 and 2020, there will be universal suffrage to return the CE and the LEUNG. You said that that has been entrenched in law. It is a timetable in law, but I can't see that in the law. The NPCSC has only said that there may be universal suffrage. And the Deputy Chairman of the Basic Law Committee, Ms. Elsie Leung, again reminded us, and I could say that she is wrong, that it was only allowed. Don't take it as a given. There may be other hurdles. And the conflict is, Chief Executive, you may see that Hong Kong people have a lot of aspirations. There is a lot of pressure in society that we really need to have universal suffrage, but you can't do anything because voices representing the central authorities are telling you that will not be the case. So my question for you is, you have to face up to this deep-rooted conflict between the Hong Kong region and the central authorities. Will you represent Hong Kong people and tell the central authorities that if they do not solve this problem of democratization of the constitutional development for Hong Kong, there will be no solution to other conflicts? When I started my term, I have already done a very important task, and that is in 2007. I represented Hong Kong people and filed a report with the Central People's Government, and the CPG agreed that in 2017 and 2020 there will be universal suffrage for Hong Kong. The stance of the SALG is very clear. The decision made by NPCSC in 2007 is constitutional and solemn. It has set down the timetable for universal suffrage to return the Chief Executive in 2017 and also to return the entire LEUNG by 2020. After we have had that timetable for universal suffrage, we just have to act according to the basic law. And this is before 2017 and 2020. We'll have to amend the 2 election methods, and we have to complete step 4 and step 3, for that matter, of the 5-step process, so that in Hong Kong we can forge a consensus on the way for universal suffrage to return the LEUNG and also the Chief Executive, and then we will have universal suffrage. As long as you follow that methodology, you cannot be wrong. The question is, we have the power. We have to try to forge a consensus. That is what is important. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chief Executive.
I have loved you. 你知唔知?
Do you know where this has come from and what it means? Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, please ask a question on the government's work. Let me ask you again.
我答呢個問題咯，好唔好？呢個係
Mr. President, since it has asked that question, let me answer it. Please sit down. You have already asked the question. Well, you may not allow him to answer if you want. Now, since you have already asked your question, please sit down. No, I have not finished asking my question. This is only a beginning. It is a quote. Mr. Leung, it is only a quote. Now, the rules for this questioning session is that the Chief Executive is here to answer questions on your queries on the work of the administration. Each member should try to keep his remarks short and just ask a question. No, I am not making any remarks. I'm just quoting from somebody. Do you know it? Do you know this quote? Please ask the question. Sorry, Mr. President, if this is a question, I can answer him. If you know about this quote, well, since you're so eager to answer, you must know it. Mr. Liang Kwok-hung, this is not a debate session. This is not a dialogue. Well, he can have a conversation with me. Please ask your question completely, and then we can ask the Chief Executive to answer it. No, he said on TV that he would have to look at somebody's picture because he was afraid of me, so I have to ask this question. This is the epitaph of Mother Teresa. If you do not know this quote, please throw away the picture of Mother Teresa. Outside the chamber, there is this post-80s group representative who are tabling a hunger strike for 120 hours. But with the people surrounding you when you came in, you did not see these 6 persons. You always make use of Mother Teresa to cope with me. I like to quote from Mother Teresa to talk to you. Please go out and talk to them. Look at them. You are already here. You don't have to use the internet. Why don't you act like Mr. Zhao Ziyang? I am too late. Sorry, students. Mr. Liang Kwok-hung, I am basing this on something. He has always the most or the best questions are those that are impromptu. Please ask your question. Their hope, their aspiration is that the administration shelve the funding application for the XRL so that we can commission another consultancy to see whether this is a waste of money and so that there can be more discussion. They all know the evils of the functional constituencies because the FCs always give you their votes. These are the 2 aspirations. Today, I hope you will act according to the final words of Mother Teresa, and that is the epitaph of Mother Teresa. Please go out and meet them. They have sent me an SMS that I must tell you this, that they should have a dialogue directly with them. If you have already answered the question, please sit down. Have you heard me clearly? Mother Teresa actually has got that epitaph from Jesus. Jesus has said many times that this is the dividing line between the Old and New Testaments. You have to love everybody, including your enemies. Mr. Liang Kwok-hung, Mr. Liang Kwok, are you saying that the post-80s group are your enemies? You must choose your words carefully. There is a system here, Mr. Chief Executive. Please sit down, Mr. Liang Kwok-hung. Therefore, we must love everybody. As I said, I respect young people. I know that I have to learn about the channels that I can communicate with them and how best to communicate with them. But sometimes emotions run high, and then if you suddenly communicate with them, that may not be the best occasion to do it. But I can tell you that we will do our utmost to find the best way to communicate with young people, not just some young people, but many young people. Some support the constitutional development, some support our policies. We have to listen to them, and we also have to listen to those who oppose us. With regard to the XRL, many hours have been spent in this council on that debate, and the community's views are also very clear. The mainstream view is that we should pass the funding application as soon as possible.
Mr. President, while the Chief Executive likes to make quote that it's a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, he just needs to make one step out it takes less than 2 minutes, and it's so quiet and peaceful out there because the people on hunger strike, they simply don't have the strength to shout slogans like what I'm doing now. So please, can I ask you to go out and meet them? There are more and more people questioning the XRL project. Would you then go and engage in a dialogue with them outside? And would you now? You must remember, they're just asking for the abolition of functional constituencies, and they've been on hunger strike for almost 50 hours. It's cold, so would you go out there? A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Mr. Chief Executive, it's just for you to take this one step. And does he understand what that means? A journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Otherwise, you know, you would falter on your last step. Now, we attach importance to views of all parties, including those of the young people. We've heard the views of those opposing the XRL. We have considered those views in this chamber, and there's another subcommittee that's studied the matter for a long time. As I said, on the question of the XRL, it's time for us to make a decision and embark on the project. Mr. Kwok-hung, the Chief Executive has answered your question. Please take your seat. Ms. Tanya Chen. Mr. Zhang, Chief Secretary, Mr. Zhang, Chief Executive, I'm still asking about the same question. There's a group of students. They love Hong Kong. And they didn't just start the aesthetic march 2 weeks ago. When we had the debate on the Star Ferry and the Queen's Pier, they have mounted marches all around the territory. Chief Executive, sorry. As I speak to you, I see that you're flipping pages, you are, you know, looking at materials before you. Honestly, it seems that you don't care much about me or the post-80s generation outside or to what I'm saying. Please, I hope you will go and listen to them. You said that you've heard them. How come you would refuse to go and talk to them outside? They haven't been here just today. As Mr. Leung Kwok-hung said, they've been here for almost 50 years. They've stayed up all night. They've been on hunger strike. So and it's a peaceful means. It's a means that doesn't benefit them really. And all they ask is to meet with you. They want you to listen, to hear their voices. So what is left now is just for you to take this step to go out and communicate with them. You mentioned being equals or being accommodating. You could have done it today. How come you're still refusing to do so today? Chief Executive, I've said it many times, we attach importance to the views of young people as we attach importance to the views of others. But when there is communication, we should do so when there is calm and rationality. And I will certainly continue to work to communicate with young people. Chief Executive, you said so many times, it's true, you've said it many times, why don't you act instead of just saying it? You say calm and peaceful. People, the students out there are calm and peaceful. Is it because you are not calm and peaceful, that's why you don't want to go out and speak to them? I have nothing to add. Dr. Pen Pei Cho. Thank you, President. Just now, the Chief Executive referred to deep-rooted conflicts in Hong Kong, while I have a rather different view on this issue. About the economy of Hong Kong, in particular about the widening wealth gap in Hong Kong, that's probably really the crux of the matter. We have seen many employees suffering declining income, and this is particularly serious among the young people. And many in the middle income group are fast becoming groups without any assets. Now, the government says all the time that it's very concerned about the livelihood of the people and their income level. But then it seems that the government acts in a different way to what they preach, to what it preaches. Let's say the civil service. All along, civil servants have been hired through this civil service establishment system, but then because of economic considerations, there was a freeze on the recruitment of civil servants, and you started to hire non-civil service contract staff. And now we are dealing with a group of NCSC staff. It's true, they are assigned to dedicated tasks, and there's usually a 5-year period for funding allocation for these posts, and most of them are in building department. And now this group we're talking about, they work in the building department. They are responsible for demolishing unauthorized building works. They actually work side by side with civil servants. Can you please come to your question, Dr. Pan? And actually, they help each other out at work. But now this group is facing unemployment because the government is going to terminate what they are doing. And we learned from the secretary that demolition of UBWs will be outsourced in future. So if eventually contractors will hire them, they will suffer another decline in their work conditions. Dr. Pan, can you please come to your question? I'll be quick because I have to explain the background. So we can see the work was originally done by civil servants, now is done by NCSC staff, and next you're going to outsource the work. The government is the largest employer. It's the one taking the lead to bring employees' wages down, and would you consider changing that practice? Chief Executive, we are accountable to the Legislative Council. We have a stringent system in dealing with our expenditure and establishment, and we strictly deal with the civil service establishment. Now, if there are ongoing tasks, we will consider hiring civil servants to take up the task. But if there are time-limited tasks, of course, we will handle those tasks through other means, and that's why we have a contract system to do with that. So there are different ways to deal with different tasks. You can't say that once we hire people, they are on permanent establishment, because then there will be no flexibility left in the civil service system, which is important. But of course, I agree, if we have temporary staff, and when their tasks are completed, we don't renew contracts, then we'll try our best to help them find jobs. And I'm sure the Labour Department will continue to make their effort to help them. Dr. Pan? In the past few months, we've approved directorate posts. Every time we approve the creation of director posts, there is always a struggle in our minds, because for the lower paid contract staff, government always finds ways to hire them in the cheapest possible ways. Dr. Pan, please come to your supplementary question. So can I ask this? Can you consider the perspective of the people of Hong Kong, and in particular about the income gap? Can the government rectify the situation? Chief Executive, I agree with Dr. Pan. In any open capitalist society, there is bound to be a wealth gap, and this is a deep-seated problem that any such society has to face. No, since the practice of free economy, no one has actually found a solution to this problem. All we could hope for is to promote social mobility, and through education we could fill the gaps left by those in the upper strata in a way. Now I agree with you, this is a deep-rooted problem. Dr. Pan, we are moving towards a knowledge-based economy. In the business sector and in the public sector, we strive for highly trained staff with strong knowledge base. Only then can we maintain our competitive edge. Now, of course, at the same time of development, we must also take care of those in the grassroots sector. We must make sure that their livelihood is ensured. Mrs. Sophie Leung. Well, I'm glad to hear that the chief executive is responding positively to the aspirations of young people. Now, I would like to talk about sports in particular. I hope there will be more sports venues at the district level. This will help young people. The economic synergy will come up with a platform for better communication with the young people. Now, can I ask the chief executive a question? In the past year, hundreds of billions dollars of hot money came into Hong Kong, leading to asset bubble. So are there ways for us to prevent the bubble? Because if the bubble bursts, it may deal a blow to the economy of Hong Kong and to our property market. And how big do you expect that blow to be? Chief Executive, it's true, hundreds of billions of dollars of hot money did flow into Hong Kong in the past year, but we must find out the reasons for that, and we must also monitor the flow of such hot money. Now, we have an extremely sound system. We have the capabilities to deal with substantial flow of capital in and out. Now, if there is some flood of capital, would it lead to low interest rate, and then in turn would it lead to surge in asset prices? So we have to monitor that, and we have to see whether we're doing right in terms of loans. Are we giving out too much loans? Now, in November, we did a comparison. We looked at the loan to deposit ratio. In November, it was 0.7. That is, for every $1 deposited, $7 were loaned out. Then in August 2008, the ratio was 0.84. That means for every $10 of deposit, $8.4 were loaned out. So you can see it's not because there is inflow of hot money, there's a flooding of loans. It's not the case. So the market is still under control. In the securities market, property market, and also in terms of mortgage, we've also done some comparisons. I understand about $600 billion flew into Hong Kong. Some $400 billion went to the securities market because there were IPOs and so on, and placements. And then this was done through proper procedures. And this is not money of Hong Kong people, it's money of foreign investors. But of course, as I say, we must monitor the flow of capital. With the property market, we are particularly careful and vigilant because this is a sensitive issue. We have to see whether property prices are surging, especially for those properties in relation to the middle income group. But at the moment, we don't see any obvious signs of a bubble. But then, of course, I'm not ruling out the fact that some are actually not able to buy properties, or they are not able to buy the properties they would like to have. So there is a need for more communication, and there is need for more studies. We know that among the general public, most are able to afford a home, but for those who could not, could we adjust the policies in any way to help them? So that we need to do more work in this respect. But what I'm saying is that there is inflight of capital, and that if it might lead to a bubble, we are extremely careful. We are watching the development every day, even every hour in the markets. And we monitor the flow of the capital carefully and closely. We don't want to have a burst of a bubble like what happened in the USA.
Thank you. If there can be a better information system or some forecast telling us that if the hot money will be removed from Hong Kong suddenly, like what happened at the end of last year in the last quarter, how can we prevent that from happening? Could there be a kind of forecast done so that you can remind the public to be careful? Is that possible? Chief Executive. As to the direction of flow of the money, we can see that as a fact, but I don't think we have the technology to see where it is going. The US could not see it, Europe could not see it, because there are many actions playing in the market. It is the result of many interactions in the market. And also, there is the way people feel about the market, and in 1 second money can come in, money can go, and that is not possible, therefore. But the fundamentals of our market are very robust. We can cope with a huge amount of money flowing in or flowing out, and yet people's lives are not affected. That is important. If we can do that, I think we have already done our job. Mr. Cheung Kok-ming. Thank you, President. President, in recent days, there is a lot of debate on the XRL. The LegCo has already devoted 10 hours to it, but then at the Finance Committee, the money has not been endorsed. I think it is very disappointing to the public. On the 12th, the DAB conducted a signature campaign. Altogether, just within 1 day, we have got 12,000 signatures. And just over lunch, just now, we were in Central, and we again conducted a signature campaign, and over 1,000 people signed to support the building of the XRL. And from the 12th to the 14th, the DAB also did a survey, a questionnaire survey. We asked very simple questions. Do you support the building of the XRL? 72% of the respondents said yes. And those opposing were 19%. Those who had no view were 7%. And we also asked the question, would the XRL have a positive effect on the development of our future? 75% said yes. Those had said no, 17.2%. And the last question was about tomorrow, when the FC will again have another debate on this issue. We asked whether they would agree to support. They said 69.9% said yes. And what is your question? Secretary or Chief Executive, as the Chief Executive, when you are faced with this issue, 60 members will be voting on it. This is the opportunity for you, Mr. Chief Executive. As the Chief Executive, please lobby members, the 60 of us here. Please lobby them to vote for you and appeal to the public to continue to support the building of the XRL. Chief Executive, with regard to our understanding of the XRL, I think I cannot compare with Ms. Eva Zhang. She is in total grasp of the issue, together with her colleagues at the Railway Subcommittee, at the PWSC, and also on other forums. She has already tackled many questions. I believe many questions have been revisited and re-answered. I believe we are all very impatient, waiting for the endorsement by the Finance Committee of the LegCo, but I must respect FC procedures. We must complete the discussion and then put the matter to a vote. I'm just like you. I very much hope that there can be an opportunity for voting on the issue at tomorrow's meeting. I agree with you that the mainstream view is very clear, but I also know very clearly that a minority of people, including young people, have a different view. We must allow them to be heard, but we must strike a balance, and by a certain time we must make a decision. Mr. Cheung Kok-ming, Mr. Chief Executive, there are over 10,000 signatures here. After this questioning time, on behalf of the DAB, I will give the administration all these signatures. I hope that it will be an expression of the public, that they have a hope, they have expectations of the government. I hope
the government will lead the public to run ahead of the economy but not lag behind in terms of economic development. Chief Executive, I understand our responsibility in this respect. We must preserve and maintain our impetus for economic development. That is why I'm proposing 10 infrastructural projects. Thank you. Mr. Albert Chan. Mr. President, just now, the Chief Executive said that he would respect the young people outside, and Mr. Leung Kwok-hung was asking him whether he would love them. So he may respect them, but he doesn't love them. Talking about deep-rooted conflicts and those conflicts in Hong Kong compared to the 60s, things were more serious. In the 60s, we were a colony, and then there was a conflict between the colonial leaders and the people of Hong Kong. In other words, between the British and the Chinese. And also the leftists started a riot. They used terrorist means. They killed Hong Kong policemen. They also burned the car, and so Lam Ben was also killed in that arson. But then many of those conflicts became less serious. Those who started the leftist riot were actually awarded with the Bohemia Medal. In other words, the SARG actually recognized their contribution to such riots in Hong Kong. Now you talk about deep-rooted conflicts. I don't think you can do anything to the political conflicts, even if you are willing. But as a chief executive, you formulate economic and social policies. Now, under your governance, let me not count the years of C.H. Tung, but under your governance, what about the monopolization of the market by conglomerates, the wealth gap widening, and also that our young people have no hope for the future? As the chief executive, first of all, do you think that in recent years there have been more conflicts so that you are negligent of your duty? Mr. Wen Jiabao had to, in a way, lecture you as between father and son to take you to task or to remind you that you have to tackle such deep-rooted conflicts. So first of all, aren't you negligent of duty? And also, what concrete measures can you take in the coming 2.5 years so that some of these deep-rooted conflicts can, in a way, be resolved? I don't expect you to really resolve all the conflicts completely, but what can you do? What can you promise Hong Kong people, Mr. Chief Executive? To improve the lots of the low-income people, we have to improve the economy. We have to invest in infrastructure. We have to support SMEs. We have to develop the industries with an advantage so that people's income can rise. We are also legislating for minimum wage so that we guarantee a certain level of wage. We have got the CSSA as our safety net, and for the grassroots, we are providing a lot of subsidies in terms of housing, education, medical services. And in the past 2 years, especially the grassroots, they faced inflation and also economic recession sparked by the financial tsunami. They were in difficulties, and we know that full well. Many times we provided relief measures. In the past 15 months, we used $87 billion for relief packages, and we actually targeted low-income and poor families. Within 15 months, for the disabled and the CSSA recipients, we gave them 3 extra months payment. And within 15 months, OAA recipients had another $3,000 and also 3 extra months payment. And also the allowance was raised to $1,000 starting from April last year. And also within 15 months, we gave 5 months rent for free for low-income families. And also we reduced the rates for 2 quarters so that they were paying less rent as well. Also, there was electricity subsidy to the tune of $300 each month for 12 months. For CSSA students, we gave them 2 times $2,000 start of scholastic year allowance. All these have been done, and as I said in the introduction, we have to continue to face up to the challenges this year, and we have to do everything we can in order to make life easier for the poor. Mr. Albert Chan, I really don't want to debate with the chief executive. Those were the measures that you took. But then the poverty issue in Hong Kong continues to worsen. The Gini coefficient continues to rise. even with the taking of those measures, the deep-rooted conflicts are still there. My question is, in the past 5 years, you said that's what you did, but the questions are still there and they are worsening, Mr. Chief Executive. Mr. Wen Jiabao has also told you that you have to resolve these deep-rooted conflicts. What can you do? You have not done your job well, but you have only told us how you have not done your job well. Mr. Chan, please sit down. I'm asking you what measures will be taken in future in order to alleviate the problems. Members, please abide by the rules of procedure. Mr. Chief Executive, when I answered this member, I said that in an open capitalistic society, the wealth gap is something that we cannot eradicate. There is one more thing. I'd like to remind members that if you want to see whether our measures were effective, between 2004 to 2008, before we had the financial tsunami, there was a very high speed of growth in Hong Kong. Within some years, there was an increase in income for the grassroots, especially for poor people between the age of 0 and 59, there was a reduction of 40%. At the same time, low-skilled workers' employment rate reduced from 10.1% to 3.5%. Also, those earning less than $5,000, if they were full-timers, there was a reduction in the number by 50%. In other words, the economic measures we took, in fact, meant that life was easier for the lower stratum in society. Our policy was correct. What we have to do now is to revitalize our economy, and also, with regard to the 6 industries with an advantage, we'd like to create new jobs and also to benefit the lower stratum because they will have more jobs. All these measures do target the Hong Kong community, especially the lower stratum in society. Maybe we are not perfect in what we are doing. I agree, especially when you are faced with the global financial tsunami. The SARG might not have done a perfect job, but we have worked hard. And as I said, we had made use of over $80 billion, which is 5.3% of our GDP, and we will continue. If we still have these difficulties, we'll continue with these measures. Mr. Zhang Wenkong, Mr. President, Mr. Chief Executive, the consultation on the constitution development is already halfway into the consultation period. The Chief Executive will understand that if we only concentrate on the 2012 package, we are not going to resolve the controversies and arguments on constitutional development. The DP has a view, and the Chief Executive should understand this, that in 2012 we should have universal suffrage, or at least in 2017 and 2020 we should have genuine universal suffrage. My question for the CE is, how do you look at this view that in 2017 there should not be any screening mechanism for nomination of candidates for the CE, and that the threshold should not be higher than that in 2007, and also there must be abolition of all FCs. Mr. Chief Executive, will you relate this view to the central authorities? And also, would you strive to implement this view so as to resolve the long-standing arguments on constitutional development?
MPCSC made a decision in 2007, and that serves as a good basis for us to proceed. It says that in 2017 we may elect the Chief Executive by universal suffrage, and there's already a framework provided for in the Basic Law. And for 2020, that is after the election of the CE by universal suffrage, there can also be election of the Legislative Council by universal suffrage. So that's the framework and that's the roadmap. So what we need to do now is to make sure that the impetus will not fizzle out in 2012. That's why we need to come to some consensus on 2012 for the 2 electoral methods in 2012. we hope there will be progress compared to the current methods. It's only with such progress we could have the impetus to move towards the goal of universal suffrage for the sea and legislative elections. Of course, if we want to arrive at universal suffrage, that involves a lot of issues that need to be addressed. That includes the retention or otherwise of the functional constituencies and what you mean by genuine universal suffrage. But of course, when we talk about universal suffrage, there is always a genuine universal suffrage. There is no such thing as a fake universal suffrage. But then how can we come to any consensus on 2012? So we could work within what we could agree on. And for issues that cannot be agreed on, we should only deal with them as the next step. Because then if we could not have any consensus on 2012, then we will be in a stalemate. I hope that now that we've accepted this solemnly made timetable for universal suffrage, let's focus our energy on 2012. Let's put our collective wisdom to improving the current system for 2012. And then we would be better placed to arrive at universal suffrage in 2017 and 2020. But if we keep bringing in issues that cannot be addressed now into the current debate, including the retention or otherwise of the functional constituency that's just mentioned, then we're just adding to the difficulties of this already difficult task, and it will end all our efforts at the end. Mr. Chairman Kwok. Now, there's only just a small hope in arriving at a solution, even as things stand now. Of course, we have differences of opinions. Now, you want to just address the 2012 options, but when we also want to address the proposals thereafter, and everybody knows where our differences lie. If you want to address this difference, even though you may be hamstrung by the five-step approach, would you at least be willing to arrange a dialogue between the pan-democratic camp and the central authorities? Because if there is no discussion, how can you come to the conclusion that such issues cannot be addressed now? They could only be touched upon 10 years later? Chief Executive, first we need to deal with issues that Hong Kong have to address. It has nothing to do with the central authorities. In 2007, the CPG has stated its position clearly as to what might happen in 2017, 2020, 2012. So what remains rests with us. Of course, I will do my utmost in dealing with the 2012 issues, and I'll try to narrow down the differences. Now, the government has put forward a consultation paper suggesting possible directions. Of course, there's still room for improvement, and we could discuss those issues. And of course, we must act within a framework of the MPC-SC decision made in 2017. Still, there is room for discussion. If you have any views on the 2017 or 2020 universal suffrage package, of course, you have every right to speak your mind. But what I'm saying is that we must first focus on the 2012 issues, because these are more urgent, and then for the other less urgent issues, we could deal with them later, because we don't want to let the public down again and repeat what happened in 2007, that is a standstill. So the very first task for us is to arrive at a consensus on the 2012 proposals, so that we could improve upon the electoral methods for the two elections, and more would be able to take part. Dr. Margaret Ng. Thank you, President. There are tens of thousands of people gathering outside the chamber. They shouted that the functional constituencies do not represent them. Can I ask the Chief Executive whether functional constituencies represent the general public? If that is the case, how come only a handful of people could cast votes? And if they do not represent the general public, then who do they represent? Chief Executive, please. In the current design of our constitutional system, functional constituencies have been around for a long time, is an inalienable part of the institution at the moment. Of course, I know there are different views on FCs, in particular on the retention or otherwise of FCs. Mr. Chairman Kong made that point earlier too. Now, but I believe we must first focus on what comes first. We have heard different views on how we should deal with FCs, but as I said, there is something of high priority, that is the electoral methods for 2012. I asked a short and straightforward question, that is whether the FCs represent the general public. So have you admitted that the FCs actually do not represent the general public, but then you're in no position to deal with the matter? Well, actually it's already a serious problem. I wonder if you have seen this chart before by Mr. De Golay. Now, of the 200,000 odd voters, 6 seats take up 80% of those voters. In other words, there are 24 seats returned by less than 50,000 voters. 24 seats returned by less than 50,000 voters. This is such a serious matter. Then how can you blame the public if they claim the FCs do not represent them? Is it the case that you won't do anything in the next few years? Chief Executive, I respect the different views expressed on the retention or otherwise of FCs. Some may think the FCs don't represent them. My apology. Please, can I ask the CE to honestly say if you agree with the people outside that the FCs actually do not represent them? Dr. Ng, you've asked a question. Of course, FCs have representatives. Some represent workers, some represent businesses' interests, some represent professionals, some represent individual sectors. And there are also representatives of a district, of local representatives. Of course, if some believe the FCs don't represent them, is nothing surprising. Because whether I'm the chief executive or you as members, if you ask anyone outside if you represent them, you can't force it upon them. Now, what I'm saying is, at this point in time, when we talk about the retention or otherwise of FCs, it may not help what we need to do most urgently. That is, we need to arrive at a consensus to improve upon the electoral methods for 2012. And this debate would actually make our task even more difficult, and I'll go further away. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong. Now, a few days ago on Monday, when Wai-yip ran a report that is in response to the aspiration public, the government will promote further development near the boundary. In Lok Ma Chau and other boundary areas, you may promote more services, and you might also open up, you might also relax the plot ratio in Kwok-hung North and the Fanling North. Now, on what exactly are the plans for developing the boundary areas, and what is the scale of the plan, and if there's to be land resumption, how would you learn from the experience of the Choi Yun Chun in considering compensation? Every time something happens in the community, of course, we have to do an analysis and find out what it's all about. We must also gain experience from any cases so that next time around we will be better able to cope with issues. Now, the XRL project has brought us many lessons. We have now come to realize that people's aspirations may be different now when it comes to issues of land resumption. But of course, at the same time, we have to protect our public money. We have to ensure the overall interests of the community. Now, in the policy address, I have proposed 10 major infrastructural projects, and some are in the new territories. And in the process, we will make sure there is adequate consultation. And in any case, the model of development is very different now. In Sha Tin, Taipo, we have high-density development, but now we will go for low-density development. And then we will also have regard to the development in neighboring places like Shenzhen, because we want to make sure there is complementary development. And we will also ensure there is proper support in terms of the transport network. And I can also guarantee you there will be adequate consultation. In terms of the outline zoning plan, we'll make sure there is a high degree of transparency and there is adequate communication. Thank you. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong. Now, in the Chief Executive's reply, it's mentioned that for the boundary development, this special feature, that is, there is a close relation to the mainland. So you need to strengthen cooperation with the relevant mainland authorities. So how are you going to have communication with the mainland authorities? The Hong Kong SL government has different levels of communication with the Guangdong provincial government and the Shenzhen municipal government. In fact, we have never been that effective in terms of communication. And I can tell you the developments we propose will benefit residents in both places. Mr. Abraham Sheck. Now, I was elected by a small circle, but then under the basic law, it says that the different interests should be represented, and I represent the building industry. Now there are 30 representatives sitting here because we represent different sectors as provided for by the basic law. On the 29th of December 2007, Chairman Kwok-ming said that Mr. Chang Xiaoming said that universal suffrage doesn't mean the abolition of FCs. Could you elaborate on that, please? Well, I don't think we should debate the retention or otherwise of FCs now. It's a complex issue, and there are historical considerations, and different sectors ought to be represented. But I think what is important is that if we want to change the constitutional arrangement, we must have the two-thirds majority support of the Legislative Council. And let's remember 50% of the members of this council are returned by functional constituencies. So I have to make this point clear, and we need to secure two-thirds majority support before we could change the system. Universal suffrage, we all know what it means. We know it's about being a fair and equal suffrage and universal suffrage. And in the when we published the white paper on constitutional development, we said that we have to consider whether the proposal meets three criteria. 1, the basic policies of the state towards Hong Kong. 2, the 4 principles in constitutional development that includes the meeting the interests of different sectors of society, facilitating the development of the capitalist economy, gradual and orderly progress, and being appropriate to the actual situation in Hong Kong. And thirdly, it's about the principles of universal and equal suffrage. And so these points have been made clear, and I believe in any debate about changes to the arrangement, on if we need to make changes to the FC arrangement, or if we make plans to abolish FCs, we have to have the majority support of LegCo members. Now, I mentioned the 3 criteria, and those are the 3 criteria, and we bear in mind in considering the issue. Mr. Abraham Sheck. Well, I fully support the 2012 package under consultation, because it's better for us to take a step forward than to stand still. Of course, we need to address the FC issue as well, but it's not an immediate issue. And I believe that we ought to retain FCs or equal or balanced representation. We ought to retain that. I agree we need to have balanced representation. before we could have consensus. Otherwise, it's not possible for us to convince 50% of LEUNG members to support the new proposal.
Mr. Wang Xingqi. Thank you, Mr. President. My question for the Chief Executive is, the Gini coefficient is at 0.533. At the UN Development Bureau, in the past year's report, it is said that out of the 27 most advanced economies in the world, Hong Kong is the one with the biggest wealth gap. And this goes to show that what Mr. Albert Chan said is correct, that you have done so much to relieve poverty in Hong Kong. However, out of the 27 advanced economies, we are still the one with the biggest wealth gap. In one Ming Pao survey, 73% of the respondents said that the government should tackle the poverty issue. 73%. And they do not only represent tens of thousands of people. In fact, over 60% of the citizens every year would say that they support universal suffrage, but then you have done nothing about it. In the circumstance, many members of the public were of the view that since the administration has done a lot, but still there is poverty, so you should do more. Say, for example, low-income transport subsidy. It should be extended. And everybody is talking about that. And also internet charges for children, especially poor children. You still are not providing it. And then the working poor issue, you have not resolved it. Also, we are pursuing the government for drawing a poverty line and also an aim to eradicate poverty. Mr. Chief Executive, you said you have done a lot, but then you are not doing these basic things. Last but not least, the review of the CSSA system so that CSSA can really help the poor, but you haven't done it either. Chief Executive, my question is, on these few matters, at least, will you implement these in the coming year so that the working poor, poor children, and low-income people will have some improvement in their livelihood? Chief Executive. When I answered Mr. Albert Chan, I already told you my views on this matter. With regard to transport subsidies, as you know, it is being reviewed. And I believe following this session, there will be a subcommittee to discuss this. After the review, we hope to improve the present system and to see how we can meet genuine needs. On the one hand, we will protect the use of public money so that there will be no abuse, but then on the other hand, we will really help the people with a genuine need. As for internet charges, I have clearly heard what the public has to say about this, especially children who have no computers at home, and even if they have a computer, they cannot pay the internet charges. I understand the FS is acting carefully and trying to deal with the problem. I hope it can be resolved. As for the working poor and the wealth gap, it is a very big and long-standing issue. We are different from other regions. First of all, in our economic system, we depend a lot on services industry, especially the financial services. We are attracting people who are paid the most to work here. So compared to the average member of the public, they enjoy a lower income. But it doesn't mean that they are not taken care of. As you know, Mr. Wong, Hong Kong has quite a sound CSSA system. It covers people's livelihood, medical services, education, as well as care for the elderly. On an annual basis, in terms of CSSA, we adjust it according to the inflation rate. Therefore, yes, we haven't done a perfect job. We want to find new resources to tackle these matters. But then we are different in a way. You must understand this. Every day we have 150 people coming into Hong Kong. And when they come to Hong Kong, they would become the members of the lower stratum. They do not have any bargaining power and they would get a low income. What I can do is to give education, to revitalize the economy so that their lot will be improved. The poor today will not be the poor tomorrow. And they will actually be middle-income families, and then when their children grow up, they can become professionals so that they have a better livelihood. This has been what has happening in Hong Kong since the end of World War II. We have to depend on our economic energy, and we have been very positive in what we do.
However, there are problems that cannot be eradicated. Say, for example, the wealth gap. Any open society has to face it. Mr. Wang Xingqi. President, Mr. Chief Executive, has only repeated what he said before, but then there are really many things that he hasn't done well. I was talking about the poverty line and also the objective of poverty alleviation or eradication. As a government, if you don't work on these fronts, how can you convince the public that you actually really like to tackle the issue of poverty? And also retirement benefit for or protection for elderly people. You are asking them to depend on the MPF, and even if elderly people have contributed to the MPF, they are not really protected after retirement. We are talking about retirement protection for the entire public, but you haven't done it. So is it what you can do to tackle poverty? Is that all? I hope that you can really formulate a poverty line and also to have a kind of annuity plan for the entire public for retirement protection. Chief Executive, at the Poverty Commission, for those people who make an income under the CSSA payment, they were regarded as the poor. They have done something, but then the Poverty Commission said that we could not just make use of the poverty concept to try to understand the poor in Hong Kong, and we cannot only just look at the income level. We must understand the needs of poor families in Hong Kong. So we have done something. They also said that we should look at whether these people have opportunities and basic needs met in their lives. For example, employment, medical services, education, and housing. Therefore, we have not drawn a poverty line, but we have got these 14-factor assessment package in order to tackle poverty. I hope this is our stance and you will understand it. Ms. Starry Lee. President, Chief Executive, in this year or so, there have been over 10 cases of the throwing of exits and corrosive exits. You said that every time you would be very angry, but so be it that you are angry, but most of the cases have not been detected. The news has been covered in Hong Kong and also Phoenix TV of the country, and also when this happened in Temple Street, CNN covered it as the only piece of news on Hong Kong, and the footage was about tourists hurt by the corrosive fluids. Now, the root of the problem is that there is a big security problem in buildings in old districts. Yesterday, Mr. Lau Kong-wah asked the question of the secretary, and the secretary said that even if there will be more money to help old buildings to boost security, we do not know where the money should go to in order to improve security in the buildings of old districts. Mr. Chief Executive, can you tell us which department can really urgently help to boost security in buildings in old districts? And will you ask the FS to put aside some money in the coming budget to help old buildings to boost the security? Chief Executive, with regard to the throwing of corrosive exit from heights, it is really very angering and also is very saddening. As you know, we put a lot of store by these issues and we have shown a lot of determination to detect these cases, and I am very happy that the police got a breakthrough just yesterday. I hope this will lead us to solve other cases as well. We have also put aside $1.7 million as award money for information from the public. This is a mammoth task. We have to strike a balance. We got these MD CCTVs and also the erection of iron gates. But these are private buildings. You have to respect the rights of the private owners. You cannot say, I'm the administration, I will dawn on you and I will build an iron gate for you and put up MD CCTV for you. It's not just a matter of resources. Ms. Starry Lee, I can undertake that if we can find a good way which is supported by the District Council and agreed to by all sectors, resources is only secondary. Our colleagues in departments and bureaus, we can certainly find somebody to coordinate this. We have morning prayer meetings every morning and it's very easy to find a solution. But what is important is whether we have the consensus of people in the localities that this will be the most effective way to do it. Right now, to tackle the culprits of throwing these objects from height, the people in the district are cooperating full well with the police. And I'm confident that if we can get their support, I'm sure the solution is just around the corner. Now, if any of such cases should happen, people should block the entrances or exits of buildings, and that will already be very effective. The police will arrive at the scene within a few minutes, and these people cannot flee. You talk about the boosting of security, maybe the setting up of MD CCTVs, and also to have better cooperation amongst residents and also the cooperation with police. All that can be followed up. But to me, we must respect private ownership. You talked about our coordination problem. That is not a problem at all. Of course, we haven't got a decision. Today, we cannot have, a bureau secretary just to look at corrosive axes, but we can certainly coordinate the matter. Ms. Lee, President, residents in all districts certainly have a consensus already. But Chief Executive, I hope you will understand the reality in the old districts. After so many cases of corrosive acid, there is already better security. Empty CCTV has been set up, but then in many buildings there is no security system, there is no iron gate or main gate, and they do not have the money. I'm not saying that you have to impose this on all districts, but resources indeed is an issue. Would you give extra consideration to this extraordinary matter, including setting up a cross-departmental coordination committee? It is not just for the Secretary for Security. I'm talking about security at all buildings. I'm not talking about the tracking down or arrest of culprits. Can you undertake that? You have, I think, expanded the scope of your question. You were talking about security and the apprehension of culprits, but now you have gone to the security issue of buildings. Now that has to be the responsibility of the building owners. You cannot ask taxpayers to take up that responsibility. However, without the security measures, and if that gives rise to other matters, then we can tackle those matters. What is important is, if security at all buildings is an important issue, and if we can really apprehend the culprits throwing the corrosive acid, then perhaps we can go through the district council. Let us iron out all the issues to see what solutions have to be found. And then if you want resources, we can consider them. And if you want coordination, we can also consider it. I think coordination and resources are just secondary. What is important is consensus in society. Ms. Audrey Yu. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Chief Executive, in your introductory remarks, you said that there is no provision for a referendum in the basic law. But as you know, whatever is not forbidden in law can be done. Now, I'd like to ask you about the air, Mr. Chief Executive. The SARG always shows us the air quality indices, etc. And according to the figures from the administration, 3 out of the 4 pollutants have been reduced in the emission levels. However, at roadside air quality monitoring stations, we will see that there are more and more days when the indicators are exceeded. Now you have your chauffeur-driven car, maybe you don't know it, especially in Central and Causeway Bay. If you walk along the streets and also in Mong Kok, you will find that there are more days when the AQIs are in exceedance of the standards. You tell us, on the one hand, that the pollutants are being reduced in number or concentration, but then on the other hand, we find the air worsening in quality. You have taken a basket of measures, but it seems the situation has not improved. Can I please ask the Chief Executive, what good measures or policies do you have to tackle the matter? Chief Executive, there are 2 types of AQIs. One from the roadside monitoring stations. Please, as Bureau Secretary, correct me if I'm not entirely correct. In terms of AQIs, one type is about roadside air quality. In Central, in Mong Kok, in Causeway Bay, where there is a high flow of vehicles, we have roadside air monitoring stations. So we monitor the quality of roadside air. That is done on a long term. Last year, in Central, Mong Kok, and Causeway Bay, the roadside AQIs were such that preventive measures have to be taken by the chronically ill. 13% for Central, 11% for Mongkok, and 7% for Causeway Bay. In other words, 1 out of 8 days, that is a bad day for Central. People have to take preventive measures. That is unacceptable. It is not ideal. There are 3 major pollutants. 1, particulates. 2, sulfur dioxide. And 3, nitrogen oxide. In the past 5 years, particulates went down by 19%, SO2 by 36%, but NOx, that increased by 15%. So the question is not about particulates or SO2, but NOx. Now, where does NOx come from? According to experts, it is because of vehicle exhaust plus the ozone in the air, and that is the compound we have. So we have to track down the emission of nitrogen and ozone in the air. As a matter of fact, with regard to NOx, we must reduce vehicle emissions, and that is why we are adopting Euro 5 diesel. We are also subsidizing the conversion of Euro 1 vehicles to more modern models of Euro vehicles. We also like to rationalize bus routes. We are also looking into more measures in order to adopt the use of electric cars, which is being tested, and that will be done.
On nitrogen emission is a regional issue. We're working closely with the Guangdong province. We hope that we could work together to reduce emissions coming from ocean emissions, and this will help to improve the air quality. So you can see we are working on these several fronts. We know where work is needed. Then this is a lengthy process, because if we want to replace vehicles, there's a burden on vehicle owners, and we want to replace the bus fleet again, there will be an impact on bus fare. It's not just about government giving subsidy to taxpayers to help them replace the cars, because there's also a question of a recurrent maintenance cost. But of course, we know where the problems lie, and we know how we could improve upon these problems. But then we can see overall the air quality indexes are improving. And in the past few years, some pollutants have been on the decline. Now we must follow what the country is doing. They are also acting to reduce pollutants, and that will help us as well. That is carbon reduction. Now by 2020, the government will reduce carbon emission by 45%. So we need to embark on major projects. But then at the same time, we're determined to do it so that we could reduce coal-powered electricity, and we could resort to other forms of power, and that will help to improve air quality here. Yes, we know there are problems, and we know how serious these problems are, but we are determined. We have already identified the source of the problems, and we are working on them step by step. Ms. Yu, I'm not trying to ask the Chief Executive to recite what he's memorized. I'm talking about the roadside air quality monitoring stations. Now, you have mentioned the series of measures. You know, in your policy address, you proposed using $3.2 billion to help people replace their vehicles, and you know it's not been very successful. Now, Chief Executive, when you talk about sustainable development, one of the considerations you had was the replacement of the bus fleet. You said you were determined, you knew where the problems lied, but then you didn't want to have any impact on bus fares. So if you were so determined that you knew where the problems lie, and you knew, and you didn't want to pose pressure on bus fare, then you've said this before. The government should pay for the replacement of the bus fleet. That is, you would buy the buses, and then you can rent buses to the bus companies. This is very important for the health of the public. It's not just those who take buses should pay the fare. Others who walk on the street have to breathe in the polluted air. we have several thousands of the Euro 2, Euro 3 buses on the street, and that's why the air is so polluted. So would you promise to take this up with the financial secretary, because the budget is coming up? In the budget, you will announce sum of money to replace, to buy the new buses, and then these buses can be rented out to bus companies. So there will be no pressure on bus fare, and we will be able to breathe fresh air. I think we have to consider the costs and the benefits. We need to strike a balance, and this is something we keep looking into. We've looked into the matter time and again. So how much do we have to plow in? Every time I asked Edward, if we plow in so much, how many more days of blue sky will we get? $6 billion. But how many more days of blue sky will have $6 billion? It's so much cheaper than the XRL. The XRL is going to cost more than $60 billion. Please take your seat, Ms. Yu. No, it's not. It's more than that. How many days of blue sky will we get in return? Today, they say that the level is on the high side. And I asked them how many of such days could be reduced, and they say it's minimal. So, of course, it's not just for the FS to make the call. We have to come to LEUNG to get money. And then people might ask, why are we spending this sum of money? Is there any collusion between the government and the businesses? How many more days of blue sky will we get in return for the money we're going to spend? Ms. Yu, please take your seat. This is not a debate. This is not a debate. Well, I can say there's a consensus in this council. Okay, Chief Executive, I promise we will continue to look into the matter. I will have to convince the FS whether it's money we should spend. And we need to have concrete justifications. How much improvement can we bring about? If there's just 1 or 2 more days of blue sky in a year, then we have to think through this very carefully. That's the end of the question and answer session. As the Chief Executive leads, members, please stand. And I'll adjourn the Council until 11 a.m. on Wednesday, 20th of January 2010.